Hi, my name is Josiah. I'm here with Odd Encounters one more time. This is going to be the next video in the Odd Journals series, it's a series of D&D journals that we talk about our world. This one is going to be a continuation on the lore and setting up for the campaign that's coming up. In the future, we're going to start doing D&D stories. I've got a whole video explaining everything. I'll link it in the description and it'll pop up here. Yeah, so this is the lore video that I'm going to talk about the 7 sons. And I'm going to run some errands while we do that, so we're just going to sit right there. So the 7 sons were incredibly powerful artifacts created when our world was first created. The world of Satira, which is the homebrew world that Daniel and I worked on together, was created by 5 very powerful beings. So the first being is the Seeker, a very powerful woman who didn't really do a lot in the creation of the world, but she gathered the other 4 beings. The other 4 beings are known as the Architects. The Seeker gathered the 4 of them together and is the one that granted them the power to create the world that they created. And she overlooks and overwatches everything in the world and keeps a continuous eye on everything that's going on in the world. So the 4 beings, the 4 architects are Swagnar the dwarf, Aileen the elf, Nina the gnome, and Zrul the orc. So each one of those is one of the 4, we call those the 4 primary races, and each one of the architects is one of the 4 primary races, and at one point they each had their own continent, but we'll get into that later. There's a lot there. I might want Daniel for that video. When the 4 of them, with the help of the Seeker, created the world, they went in and they created sons. Each one of the different sons, the 7, we'll get into that. Each one of the sons held a certain aspect of control and power over the world. So the first son was created by the dwarf architect, Swagnar, and the first son was the son of creation. So that son granted Swagnar the ability to create the planet, essentially. The second son was the son created by Nina, the gnome, and that son was the son of change and the weather, and that allowed her to alter different aspects. It created seasons, it created the weather, and it allowed her to implement that in the world as a whole. The next son was created by Aileen, and it was the son of knowledge. This son brought in the ability for just knowledge in general. Magic came from that, but it came a little bit later. Magic wasn't really invented until a couple thousand years later. But yeah, so knowledge. And then the last son was the son created by Zrul, the orc, and that was the son of power. So each of the architects each created one of those 4 sons. Then together they created the spirit son, which is self-explanatory, and the life son. Yeah, so each one of them created a son. Together they created spirit and life. And then what the architects did is they took the life son, the 6th son, and they shattered it. And they spread the shard remains of the life sun all over the planet, and this created life. So as each of the individual shards mixed with the ground and the rock, it created various different forms of life. Hey, that was a lot done. Where were we? The suns, yes. So the life sun was shattered and the shards were spread all over, and where it combined with different aspects of the world, it created different types of life. It created all different plants, it created humans, dwarves, elves, pretty much anything else, kobolds, anything else that's present in a D&D world. Following that, there was a slight problem, and that when they destroyed the life sun, they gave birth to the Death Sun. The Death Sun had a name. So each of the different suns is intelligent and alive. They can communicate. They're sentient. That's what I was looking for. So the Death Sun, quote unquote, is named Bane, and Bane is the 7th sun. Bane is a very evil sun in the sense that it's death, and death is bad, and Bane essentially desires for life to be destroyed and for all life to be sucked into him. He would gain control over all life if they die, essentially. Every time they die, their body goes to Bane and their soul goes up into the heavens and literally becomes one of the stars. It's pretty cool. And that was my turn. Fantastic. So each one of the architects kind of had a different idea as to what to do about Bane, because Bane is a magical evil force. So ultimately the 4 of them decided that they were going to take Bane and entrap him in the center of Satira, in the center of the planet, underneath all of the planet. They did just that. They built up the planet around him, and then Nina, the dwarf, Nina, the gnome, sent forth all of her gnome minions, and they got to work building this massive ward. It was a connection of underground tunnels that was meant to magically entrap Bane in the planet. Upon completing it, Bane eventually ended up corrupting the ward itself, and that created the Underdark. And that's where all of our Underdark creatures come from. Nina went through and did that, and Bane recognized that it was gnomes that trapped him, and built up this ever-growing hatred for the gnomes, and also began to work towards corrupting and breaking free from the ward that she created for him. But he also developed a trap. So each one of the architects, I mentioned this earlier, each one of the architects had their own continent. There was a continent for their individual races. Other races were also present on those continents, but they were pretty much designed for each one of the 4 primary races. So the gnome continent was really far up in the north. It was essentially the North Pole, and Bane went through and trapped that continent. So at some point in time, he was able to breach through enough and create an explosion, launching shards of that continent into the atmosphere of the planet. When in doing so, he ultimately failed to kill all of the gnomes, but he created 7 different moons that now orbit Satira. Each of the 7 moons is a portion of that continent, and one of the 7 moons, the largest moon, I believe it is Ima is the name of the moon, which means mother in Hebrew. The largest moon has gnomes living on it, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so that was what Bane did to the gnomes. Pretty awful, and he's been working to break free ever since. So that's where Bane is located. The other 5 remaining suns, because the 6th sun was destroyed, which is life, so 7's a bit misleading of a number. Each of the suns is located, each of the 5 remaining suns, is located in this area called the Ladder to the Heavens. So on the South Pole, there is a mountain range, and the tallest mountain in that mountain range has, on the top of it, a magical ladder that reaches up into, not space, it's about 300 feet, I believe, give or take, but it reaches up to a trapdoor, and there's nothing else up there. And if you open the trapdoor, it takes you into this magical realm that's different for everyone that steps foot in it. And in that magical realm, the 5 suns are each placed in a pedestal, and that causes them to magically orbit around the planet, essentially. Our planet doesn't actually exist in space. It's kind of just floating in the astral sea, which is pretty cool because when you die, your soul goes on, if you go on to the good one, that's not Celestia, I can't remember the name of it right now. I'll put it in. Ha. If you go to that place, when you die, because you're good, then your soul becomes one of the stars visible in the sky above Satira. And your soul is only visible on the night that you died, which is pretty cool. So every year, certain stars are visible, and if someone dies during the day, then their star will be visible that night. So you can kind of continue to commemorate people in that way, which is a pretty cool thing. But yeah, so that's where each of the suns is located, is in the ladder to the heavens. And for the most part, things were pretty clean. The suns being there, all 5 of the suns being there, reinforced the ward created by Nina. She created it so that the suns' magic reinforced it, and for the most part, Bane was kept trapped in the ward, which is the Underdark in our world. And that was a pretty good thing until this really pesky dude came along. This guy's name was Maggiano. He came in, and around 1,000 years after the world was created, he invented magic. He began to understand and see that the world worked in a slightly different way that people thought prior to that. And so he began to pull on the strings, and he ultimately created magic in our world, which is pretty cool. We have an actual birthplace of magic. So he created magic. He went into the 7 suns, or the 5 suns, sorry, where they're stored, and he stole one of the suns. And now the way that the suns orbit is there was one sun in the center, and there are 4 suns kind of in a compass system around that one sun in the center. When he plucked the sun of power from the sky, the 3 other suns that were in the points of the compass were launched and sporadically spread around the planet, leaving only the one left in the sky, which was knowledge. No, spirit. Spirit was the only one left in the sky, yes. And that's also, the stars kind of follow the spirit star across the sky, the spirit sun, which is pretty cool. There's a little side. But yeah, so he stole that, and that displaced a total of 4 of the suns. And in doing that, it weakened the ward for Bane. So that is actually how Bane was able to blow up the continents for the gnomes. And Zrul, the architect orc, actually found out that Maggiano did that. And so Zrul went to Maggiano's hiding place, which was his mansion on one of our continents. I'll explain the world and the continents in a future video, but in one of the continents, Nivral, he was hiding in his mansion near the center of Nivral, and Zrul went in and executed him. History kind of plays it up like a big battle, but it was really he was stabbed in the back while he was sleeping. But in killing the guy who invented magic, it created almost like a black hole effect for magic, and Nivral became a magicless continent. Once you get a little bit further from the source, magic gets pretty sporadic and just does wild things. It's kind of like wild magic, it's just insane, but it's insane all the time for anyone, and so the people living on Nivral began to flee from this magical black hole and built up a city called, or a kingdom called the Empire of the Golden Crown, in a huge kind of man-made ring around the continent, and then they outlawed magic completely. And the party in our previous campaign actually had to get into the continent. They had to get past the Empire of the Golden Crown, and it's completely illegal to enter into the continent. So they had to get past the Golden Crown, over this giant wall, and into the center of the continent to get the sun from Maggiano. And in doing so, they actually rose Maggiano from the dead as a lich, and they ran away. And Maggiano created an army of elementals, including each one of the 4 elder elementals, completely destroyed the continent of Nivral and headed their way, and then later destroyed another continent. But I'm going to tell the story of Maggiano and the whole party later, and with members of the party, because that'd be a lot of fun. For now, what's important is that Maggiano did that, and it sucked, and Bane got powerful, and Bane was able to breach different areas and create more corruption, and that's where kind of drow and stuff was be able to first of all form in the early years, and then eventually begin to break free from the surface. But the party was successful 500 years prior to our new campaign, which is starting on August 24th, prior to that, 500 years prior to that, the party was successful at replacing the 4 extra suns in the sky and reinforcing the ward and trapping Bane for now. So that is the 7 suns. Not really 7, it's a little misleading, but ultimately 7 suns were created. But that's the 7 suns, so that will be more important in future stories and explanations about our world that we have created. But for now, that's where I'm gonna end this video. Thank you guys so very much for watching. Feel free to leave a comment, let me know what you think, what you thought, who the dopest and coolest architect is, and if you could make a sun, what kind of sun would you make? And maybe I'll use it in our campaign. But for now, thank you guys. Have a good one.